United States submarine base at Key West, Florida. A dispatch that quoted President Truman's press secretary, Charles Ross, as saying that President Truman has no knowledge of any secret project by this government that would give substance to the existence of such objects. Ross also said that both the Air Force and the Navy deny that such objects exist.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, what's up? My name is Noelle, and I have actually a question to ask.
Oh, of me?
Yeah, and anyone listening. Do you know about the funeral stud? Do you know?
Well, I'm Chelsea, and I do not know about the funeral stud.
If I say someone's a stud, do you know what I'm referencing?
I would say you are referencing a horse that you rent to impregnate a mare.
Well, this is how I know you're so locked out of the LGBTQ plus community that it's actually insulting and feels a little Republican.
That's so bold to say to me.
So, well, you're out of the game, bitch. So,
oh my gosh,
you're in a cis married relationship.
Hear.
You know nothing, and it's showing. You're killing the culture. So,
oh my god, yeah, I've been white. I've been straight washed. Please tell me. I'm ready to learn.
A stud references a lesbian who dresses masculine and or is masculine presenting and usually has like a stud name rather than their legally given name, but they're not like trans identifying or any sort of like non-binary. They're just studs.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So everyone knows a stud. And on TikTok recently, the most insane event happened, and it has me absolutely gagged. It is apparently world-renowned YouTube singing stud who is hired to come to funerals and sing an original song.
Okay.
And I know this is an audio-only podcast, but the audio alone is just as great. But I am going to also show Chelsea the video. Okay. Hearing
all right.
Sound. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Lord, I got some things I need to say. Lord, I got some things I need to say. Just say devil, you can't win. Say when I'm down to my love.
The airplane passing over really adds.
Yeah, the airplane was good. The airplane was good.
We're also going to get 2 trucks passing by.
Okay.
But the best part's about to come up. I wonder if you can catch it.
Wait, were they lip syncing?
No.
I didn't get it.
No, the best part was right here, and you missed it, where they are conducting. Okay, they're conducting the funeral procession right now, mid-song. I need.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, release them. I wish it ever never.
Release them? Was that it? Okay.
You are so locked out of the culture, it's insane.
I just don't release them. Like, yeah, it's fun, but
no, you don't get it. You're not in anymore, and I have to accept that you're a 40-year-old married woman to a straight man, so you don't understand the culture. And that's fine.
Okay, all right.
That's fine. Okay. To other people, they'll understand the strength and symbology within that.
Well, I have a trans flag on my house. I know gay people.
Clearly that means nothing.
All right, that's fair. Well, I'm sorry that fell flat on such a terrible audience. I would say that I would do better, but I only seem to be getting worse.
And yeah, and it's really unfortunate. Not only did you not know what a stud was, you didn't see the strength, beauty, and artistry in that stud conducting the funeral procession.
I see it. I just didn't understand what I was watching at the time. I feel like the context of it, you know what? It's like you showed me a cake and you wanted me to appreciate the ingredients of it, and I wasn't ready.
And that's fair.
But I will say, it is on me. It is on me. I'm the piece of shit.
Yeah.
In this scenario,
at least you know.
Yeah, there's no redemption from this point on. As soon as the podcast is over, I think I'm just gonna go lay in the road.
I think you should. And maybe run that TikTok back while you're laying in there so it could really have an impression on you.
I think that's only fair and wise. Yeah.
So, anyway, speaking of Chelsea needing to learn the culture,
I mean, I wasn't wrong what a stud was. I just went with a horse.
I think you were wrong. I think you were wrong.
All right.
So to lock Chelsea back into the culture, and actually everyone, when I was going through some of the research for this episode today, it really dawned on me how uninformed the collective we in the United States are, and how when you look back on it, it feels intentional misinformation, and a lack of education on the histories of what we've done as a nation and a people feels really intentional, because when you even take like 2 seconds to sit with it, you see every single like fault and failure from the individual to the government establishment. So, with that said, the reason why I was looking into this in the first place is because 5 days ago, in this month, December 2025, the Trump administration broke decades of tradition by choosing not to officially commemorate World AIDS Day, the first time the US federal government has skipped the observation since it was established by the World Health Organization in 1988. No presidential proclamation was issued, and the State Department employees were told not to use government funds for related activities. The decision comes alongside sweeping cuts to both global and domestic HIV/AIDS programs, including billions in reduced aid to organizations like USAID and UNAIDS, and slashed funding for the CDC and NIH prevention initiatives. Public health experts warn these moves could reverse decades of progress, leading to millions more infections and preventable deaths. Celebrities like Elton John and Madonna have publicly condemned the administration, while a State Department spokesperson defended the policy, saying an awareness day is not a strategy. I also want to say another piece of news that I saw pop up, unrelated, but in the same vein. Trump also changed the policy that allowed for free entry into the national parks on MLK Day and Juneteenth. He took those away and has replaced it with his birthday. So
yeah, it's disgusting, dude.
Just, unbiased opinions, I guess. So in the late 1970s, young men began showing up in hospitals with illnesses that didn't belong to their age group. The doctors who first saw them didn't yet know they were standing at the edge of a historical abyss. They only knew that the bodies in front of them were breaking rules medicine had depended on for decades. A man in his 20s or 30s should not have Kaposi sarcoma, a cancer so rare in the United States that it was mostly associated with elderly men at a rate of 2 new cases per million people per year. He should not have, what is this?
Pneumocystis.
Pneumonia?
Pneumocystis. Pneumonia.
Pneumocystis pneumonia?
Yeah, I'm sorry for laughing at your.
Yeah, I don't know if you know about this, but I took a test recently and it said I had a diagnosis, so.
It did, yeah, and I'm being so insensitive to you right now. You illiterate bitch.
We know
I'm
this.
just kidding. I just saw pneumo and then pneumonia together, and then I was like, pneumocystis. I did hooked on phonics to get through that word.
I didn't have hooked on phonics. You know that they're actually not teaching kids to sound out words anymore? They're teaching word association.
Recognition and stuff, right?
Yeah,
that's crazy. Yeah. I don't know if that's the way to do it.
It's not. It's not. I can tell you right now. So this is a insanely rare pneumonia that is only seen in severely immune compromised patients, like people in chemotherapy or people who have received organ transplants, or people who already had like a known diagnosed compromising disease. It wouldn't just be something that like a stereotypical healthy 20-something-year-old would get.
Yeah, these are like an old man's game
Hmm.
type of illnesses.
And very like niche.
Hmm.
Yet, here it was in young bodies killing people faster than it could be written down. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, those causes clustered in places where gay communities had built visible, vibrant neighborhoods in New York City, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Places where queer life had expanded after Stonewall into a kind of hard-won public freedom. But that visibility became a trap because the early patients were disproportionately gay men. The mystery was not treated as a national emergency, it was treated as a punishment. That social fact mattered as much as any biological one. From the beginning, the epidemic was not only fought in labs and hospitals, it was fought in language, in rumor, and in whether the sick were allowed to be seen as human. On June 5th, 1981, the CDC published a short clinical report in the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. 5 previously healthy young men in Los Angeles treated for biopsy-confirmed pneumonia had happened between October 1980 and May 1981. By the time the report appeared, 2 were dead out of the 5. The report was written in careful language of public health, symptoms, lab findings, the stripped down facts of a clinical observation. But the cultural translation happened immediately. Newspapers and television didn't just report a new syndrome, they reported a story about who it was happening to. The earliest headlines, the labels, the discriminatory, hateful jokes disguised as commentary, these didn't simply hurt feelings, they shaped the response. They taught the public to see this sickness as a moral lesson rather than a biomedical emergency. And in the US specifically, that framing becomes policy. Policy becomes funding, funding becomes research, research speed becomes survival time. Within months, similar cases appeared in other cities. Men developed lesions that looked like bruises but didn't heal. They developed infections that seemed to come out of nowhere and didn't respond to treatment and medicines that had worked in the past. Many lost weight so quickly and severely, friends described them as shrinking in fast motion. Doctors asked intimate questions in crowded clinic rooms as if humiliation could be justified by fear. Patients learned a new kind of dread, not only the dread that they were dying, but the dread that the world would treat their dying as deserved. By 1982, there was pressure to name what was happening. The name that circulated early were some of the most damning acts of the crisis. One acronym in particular, GRID, or gay-related immune deficiency, took hold in the public. And in the public imagination and even some medical context, it sounded scientific, it sounded tidy, it was catastrophically misleading, and effectively said, you get this by being gay, so don't be gay. And this wasn't simply a lie, it was a permission slip for indifference. If this disease belonged to a stigmatized group, then politicians could treat urgency as optional. If the illness was framed as a consequence of deviance or lack of morality, then compassion could be portrayed as enabling.
We're seeing this kind of now, I think, with like the whole trans debate is like, okay, well, if you, for example, get depressed or whatever, because you're trans or, it's like, well, then you deserve that. Just don't be trans. Like we're seeing parallels, like, and that's obviously, I'm not equating that being trans is a disease at all. It's just that narrative follows. If like, we're going to let you suffer because we're not going to give you any treatment, care, compassion, or whatever. And if that suffering affects you in a negative way, it's your fault.
Yeah, and the through line is choice, right?
Yeah. So
at this point in the AIDS epidemic, before it was even given the name AIDS, it was a disease, a lethal disease that you got by being gay. And
right.
so that to the mainstream public at large and the discourse shared, it was don't be gay then. Don't be gay then and you won't get this disease and die. Or if you do have this disease and are dying, it's because you are gay and were participating in activities that would put you at risk. So that's like your choice. And now you have to choose that bed to lay in, quote unquote. Same goes for the trans conversation and medical care towards trans people. They go like it's a choice. You can just like do whatever and not have to get any sort of gender affirming care or receive gender affirming therapies. Like you can just like be whoever you are. That's a choice. You're choosing to go down this path, and so whatever happens to you is your choice. It's It's a total misunderstanding and mischaracterization of what's happening, and it's a little bit of like willful ignorance, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah.
In September 1982, the CDC published its first case definition of AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, for national reporting. But even with the formal definition, the emotional reality on the ground remained it. Patients were not battling an immune collapse. The culture had decided their bodies were evidence against them. At this point, thousands were infected and many were dying. But the machinery of government moved as if it were watching the crisis through frosted glass. Hospitals denied care outright or hid patients away. Funeral homes refused bodies. Employers fired people who tested positive or were suspected of being positive. Landlords evicted tenants if they thought this person could be infected. People learned that disease could make you homeless as quickly as it could make you weak. The early epidemic did something especially cruel. It made people fear one another while needing one another more than ever. Because still the cause was unknown at first, theories multiplied. Some blamed paupers, which maybe Chelsea is locked in enough to the culture to know what
I
that
do know.
is.
Yeah, I do know
Okay.
poppers. Yeah.
So they said paupers were to blame. They suggested that excessive exposure to semen weakened the immune system.
That's true.
I mean,
That's real. Yeah.
some blamed bathhouses, club life, the number of sexual partners. Medicine and trying to find patterns sometimes reached too quickly, and for the patterns most visible, they had already been tainted with judgments. Theories that began as desperate hypotheses hardened into certainty. Instead of a country mobilizing a rapid, well-funded response, much of the energy went into policing behavior. It was easier to say stop doing that than to say we must save them. It was easier to treat pleasure as a pathogen than to admit the pathogen was traveling through the same human channels all diseases travel through: intimacy, blood, childbirth, need.
You're directly affected by this
I am.
because Noelle's a little blood baby and she had to get a blood baby transfusion
It's true.
around this crisis. So, God, no one thought of the children, but it was like the CDC and culture dropping the ball on people that, and it sucks. It's one of those things of like when men are shitty and you're like, well, wait till you have a daughter. And it's like, why do we have to wait for that to be humanized? Like now that babies are being impacted, now we're going to care. And even then they didn't care.
Mm-hmm. And don't worry, we're going to talk about one of the more famous cases of this happening. But yes, I was like an RH baby and received multiple blood transfusions in 1992 in Long Island, New York. So, as we experienced during COVID, in any epidemic, leadership matters, not only for budgets and bureaucracies, but for whether the public is taught to fear the disease or to fear the people who have it. American demon Ronald Reagan is the true patient zero when it comes to understanding the who and why of a slow and inadequate response. Reagan did not publicly say the word AIDS until September 17th, 1985, during a presidential news conference when a reporter specifically asked about it. And this isn't just an answer you might need on a trivia night of the worst American presidents. It's a marker between what was happening in hospital wards and what was being acknowledged at the highest level of government. By the time a president names a crisis, the crisis has already been named in the lives of the sick, by lesions, by auction en masse, by lovers sleeping in plastic chairs, by friends buying sympathy cards in bulk. Silence from leadership does not stop a virus, but it can stop resources. It can stop urgency. It can validate stigma. It can give permission for state and local officials to treat the crisis as politically inconvenient. People living through those years often describe it like being trapped in a burning building while the people with the keys argue whether you belong inside. And this is the harm. Not that Reagan personally caused HIV, but that the administration's delay of public engagement and broader political climate helped create a landscape where stigma thrived and response lagged, where the epidemic was allowed to accelerate through neglect. And as we know very well in today's climate, fear creates a villain. Epidemics are scary not only because they kill, but because they make randomness visible, the unsettling reality that we can be destroyed by something unseen. In CDC records mapping early case networks, a French-Canadian flight attendant named Gaetan Dugas appeared often because he spoke. He spoke when others were too scared, giving researchers timelines, lists of contacts, cities, and clubs, all in hopes of answers. Gaetan was a force of light. His smile could fill a room. He was beautiful, fashion forward, and unapologetically himself. He tailored his stewardess outfits and agonized over the perfect ascot for each city he visited. But it wasn't style that made him unforgettable, it was the way he loved. He cared with an intensity that made strangers feel known, a hand on yours in turbulence, a soft word acknowledging fear, a laugh that lingered for long after. People remembered him not just for being seen, but for making them feel seen. He was rare, radiant, a once in a lifetime person. That warmth extended to his cooperation with the CDC. He traveled wherever they asked, gave whatever they needed, not because he had to, but because he could see the devastation around him. He knew that this disease did not just to himself, but to those he loved. In the CDC's internal records, he was labeled Patient O for outside Southern California. But O became zero, and a person of laughter and love was transformed into a monster, Patient Zero. And the media ran with it. A man who lived openly, who loved deeply, who tried to help, was recast as the cause. A hypersexual sociopath spreading disease deliberately with no one yet when no one yet understood how it spread, and no test existed to prove anything. What happened to Dugas is one of the darkest moral failures of the era. Later, genetic research shows HIV was circulating in the US long before Dugas was part of any map. His strain was not the root of the American epidemic, but another victim of it. And I think actually when he went to New York to get treatment for the cancer, he was marked as patient 57. So it's just like willful ignorance, purposeful misdirection, purposefully misinterpreting information, not looking into anything for verification or authenticity, but like running with essentially a fucking TMZ story.
Yeah, and he was also like a perfect poster child for like what gay men are in people's radical cultural zeitgeist. Like they're flamboyant, they pair their ascots, they're flight attendants. Like even male flight attendants to this day, like still have that stigma attached of like promiscuity, gayness, femininity. And it's just super, I don't know, it's just so fucking sad because like patient zero literally is like it's a connotation of where like people still use it to this day. Like I got food poisoning at a roller derby tournament forever ago, and we're like, who is patient zero? You know,
Yeah.
Like you don't even think that you're perpetuating stereotypes in that way. But now that has become literally something where we know that that's the bad initial first cause. And for him to get labeled with that, it's just,
Yeah, very much
oh,
so.
buddy.
And he was he was really the perfect victim because he was that like stereotypical poster child of what not just queerness, but out and loud and proud, vibrant
Mhm.
queerness was.
Yeah.
So it almost, again, you can't necessarily prove that there were reporters who intentionally misinterpreted the information. They knew that it was O for outside of California because it was on a mapping strain, but they chose to interpret it as zero and run with articles calling him patient zero. I can't say for certain if that was intentionally done, an intentional misdirection, but you can't like help but feel that way when you get to know who he was
Yeah.
more
I
as a
think
person.
I think it was probably very politically influenced, just like any fucking argument we're having in this day and age, right? Like patient zero on its own, not that bad. But then you tie it to this DEI on its own, not bad. Now it has political fervor behind it, so to speak.
Yeah. And as usual, corrections arrive quietly and scapegoats arrive loudly. Jesus. Dugas died in 1984 at the age of 32, never seeing his name or reputation repaired at scale. Friends remembered him as witty, magnetic, theatrical, warm. He always remembered your favorite bottle of wine to bring to dinner. He made rooms lighter, he danced, he laughed loudly, and when he became ill, he tried to help. And history punished him for it. Today, those friends continue to honor him, speaking his name, telling his truth, and slowly repairing the legacy of a man who was never a villain, only a human being living fully, brilliantly, and compassionately. Survivors describe those years as if the air itself carried dread. You could wake up healthy and go to bed dying. You could kiss someone goodbye and never see them again. In the Castro or Greenwich Village in the early 1980s, the scene was surreal. Wheelchairs pushed down sidewalks that used to be filled, obituaries taped to lampposts like missing persons posters. Hospital wards full of men under 40, funerals weekly, sometimes daily. People writing wills in their 20s, friends burning mattresses after someone died because no one knew what was safe. Many families disowned sons at the moment they needed family most. Some parents refused to visit, some refused to claim bodies. Lovers who had spent years together were treated by hospitals as legal strangers. Partners were denied the right to hold their hand in their last hours. This discrimination was the force as to why so many died alone. And still, people tried to live. They danced even when thin as bone. They kissed even when afraid. They threw parties in hospital rooms, ivy poles wrapped in Christmas lights. Joy became defiance. If the world wanted them invisible, they would glitter louder. When institutions retreated, community showed up. Nurses are remembered in these stories like battlefield medics. Many hospitals were afraid. Some staff refused to touch patients, but others stepped into the fire. They held hands. They washed bodies no one else wanted to touch. They changed sheets soaked with night sweats. They became mother, sister, lover, priest. They painted nails, washed wigs, smuggled in pets, and applied makeup over lesions so patients could feel handsome one last time. In a crisis where dignity was being stripped away, that mattered more than anyone could truly understand. Lesbian communities, often erased in mainstream retellings, became caretakers of gay men abandoned by families, institutions, and society. Lesbian care work during the AIDS crisis was not a supporting role, it was infrastructure. While the public story often frames the era as gay men suffering and dying and straight institutions failing them, it regularly skips the fact that many of the people who made survival possible were lesbians, especially working class lesbians and lesbians of color. They staffed volunteer shifts when fear emptied rooms. They learned new medical routines on the fly. They absorbed the fallout of abandonment, cooking, cleaning, laundry, managing medications, paying rent, negotiating with landlords, arguing with insurance companies, picking up prescriptions, making sure someone didn't die alone. That is not just help, that is a counter system. And it's important to acknowledge who those lesbians were in relation to power. Many were already politicized through feminist and queer organizations. They had practiced at building networks outside of official structures, and that didn't protect them. When hospitals were hostile and families disappeared, lesbian communities didn't merely fill a gap, they brought an ethical care as resistance. Not sentimental care, but gritty, logistical, relentless care. The kind that says, if the world decides your life is disposable, we will prove it isn't. And if we can't keep you here, we will keep you human until the end.
Well, and I think that's something that we've kind of learned with our own like politics and worldview changing. And this is what we mean of like community, why community matters, and why when people are losing their benefits and funding, it's really locally important support that gets people through it. Like fill your local community fridges and stuff like that. Because I think the narrative of it saying like, okay, well, vote. Like that's like a once a year thing for a lot, or like some people just don't vote, or like, okay, I'm gonna vote, but like, what about the people who need help right now? Or like I don't know. This is just so fucking heartbreaking, especially when you say like that. Oh, what was the exact word? Oh, that they would glitter louder. Like one of my best friends, Glitz, named herself Glitter and died with, recently. And it's just like seeing that how they were treated and how the community had to come together to help get funeral costs taken care of, to help their daughter, transition into having all this being, responsible for like bills, a business, like all of these different things. Like you get no fucking help from government or like bigger organizations in those times because they just simply don't give a shit about you. So you have to like, I don't know. I know it's like preaching to the choir and it's very easy to have this type of armchair activism, but just seeing that it's always there, but like we don't fucking hear about it, man. I had no idea that there were entire fleets of support coming from the gay community within itself, And now
And
we're just seeing it fucking happening more and more. Like the fact that we
yeah,
don't learn from our mistakes, it almost makes you want to like quit fighting because it won't get better. But it's like, well, someone's got to fucking do something on a local level.
yeah, and the better is relative, right?
Mm.
Better happened by having someone next to your bedside. Better happened because um there was a stud arguing with your landlord to make
Yeah.
sure you had a place to live, even if it was your last few weeks. That I think that's where better comes from. There's two things
Yeah.
that can happen at the same time, right? Simultaneously. We can say that it should be government's responsibility to ensure that we have the basic necessities for life, and that is, shelter, food, water, medicine, education. Um, I think these are the bare minimums, and I do think that it is government's job to help its society survive existence because that's it, period. You know what I mean? And I do think that we should be paying a reasonable amount of taxes, and those should be actually put in towards social programs like those things to protect and not even just protect, but bring up
Yeah.
humanity as a whole, right?
Hmm.
And instead, we pay God only knows in taxes, and 95% of it is put into a military industrial complex. And as one of the richest nations in the world, we have people dying of completely preventable diseases or people without medication that would save their life. I'll jump forward a second here. Like there's a medication out called PrEP, which is a preventative medication you could take daily that protects you from getting HIV.
Hmm.
It's not available to everyone. It's not accessible. And that's a
Yeah.
failure of the government, right?
Yeah.
So there is that version of reality where we can acknowledge that government has a responsibility and it's failing. And then there's the other half, which is the reality of just being human and sharing like this fucking rock that we're all floating on, which
Yeah.
is community building. We can fight for government to be representative of its people. Absolutely, but that doesn't stop the mutual aid and community building and support that we need to give to each other. Government is there to help. It's not the end all be all. You
Yeah.
still need to be there for each other and be there for your neighbors and be there for your friends and your community and give when you can and destigmatize the need and want for community and mutual aid, right? We talked about it
Yeah.
briefly with food stamps being taken away. There are so many people that even if they haven't outright told you, who rely on food assistance programs to feed
Yeah.
themselves and their children. It's one of the cruelest fucking things in the whole world to hear this administration proclamate that they're pro-life while taking away food assistance programs from elementary school children. I know so many people personally who woke up early to get to school the moment it opened so that they could have free provided breakfast from the
Yeah.
school. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't have eaten that day.
Hmm.
Just like the schools who provide food assistance programs throughout the summer, because it's a full acknowledgement that we have failed so significantly as a country and a society that if these children aren't in school, they aren't getting fed. It's
Hmm.
an impossibility. It's a reliance and a need, right? Um,
Well, and it follows that same narrative of like, if you're gay, you get AIDS. If you're
mhm.
poor, you don't eat.
Yeah.
And we put the blame on it. Well, you got AIDS because you chose to be gay, and you don't get to eat because you're not working hard enough. But
Hmm.
it's like these are situational things that just occur throughout the universe. Like,
Yeah.
and that when there's something to help stop the floodgates and have ease to it, like
Mhm.
I want my neighbor to have I don't want my neighbor to pay for, any of their prescription pills. But when push comes to shove and like a tree falls down in their yard, I can go help with that. Like,
Hmm.
you don't need to send like the government in and stuff, but like, fuck, dude, make it so that I have the time and ability and also the health to offer that community assistance when I can.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all interconnected, but
Mhm.
there has been a stigmatization towards mutual aid and community building that it is, just like you said, oh, you're gay, you deserve to get sick. Oh, you're poor because you're not working hard enough, and that's why you can't
Mhm.
eat. That is all intentional, right? Because when you
Yeah.
stigmatize something and you make it the other, you allow people to blindly close their eyes to it and say that it was their choice and they deserved what's happening to them.
Yeah.
It removes the accountability of the failure.
Yeah.
So, speaking of trans women's roles sit even deeper in the erased layer because it collides with multiple forms of stigma at once: transphobia, misogyny, racism, poverty, criminalization, and the policing of sex work and housing. Many were barred from, quote, respectable channels of help, jobs, stable housing, healthcare without harassment, so they built their own. They created informal networks faster than institutions ever could. Couch rotation, spare room shelters, shared meals, pooled cash, medication runs, warning systems about violent clients or abusive cops, information chains about sympathetic clinics, cars, translators, nurses, and safe rooms where patients could take their last breaths without mockery. There's a hard truth here. Trans women were not only excluded by mainstream society, they were sometimes excluded within queer communities too. The second layer of prejudice shows up in who got believed, who got leadership, who got resources, whose deaths were publicly mourned, whose caregiving was credited, and whose bodies were treated as shameful, even in spaces claiming liberation. Trans women were asked to show up, but not always allowed to be centered. They were relied on, but not always protected. They were mourned privately and erased publicly. So when we say they showed up anyway, it's not just a phrase, it's an indictment and a revelation. Even when treated as expendable, trans women refused that logic. They made kin where kinship was denied. They built belonging that didn't require permission. They carried medicine and love through conditions designed to punish them for existing, showing what true care, radical, unrelenting care looked like. And this is how chosen family became infrastructure. Friends became hospice workers, lovers became nurses, neighbors became grief counselors. People learned bureaucracy of dying because no one else would do it for them. Despite that prejudice and newly forming violent stereotypes would say, AIDS did not discriminate. Ryan White was 13 years old when he was diagnosed with AIDS in December 1984 after contracting HIV from a blood transfusion to treat his hemophilia. When his diagnosis became known, he was barred from attending school, even though medical experts confirmed that HIV was not spread through casual contact. His case became a national story, exposing the discrimination that had long been normalized. But Ryan was witty, warm, determined, and deeply compassionate, a young man whose courage was matched by his sharp humor. He did not shrink from public scrutiny. He faced it head on, speaking openly about his condition, correcting misconceptions, and demanding that the world see the human being behind the disease. Ryan's parents, Jean and Hubert White, became never ending advocates, not just for their son, but for the truth and justice. They fought school boards, faced hostile media, and challenged policies that endangered children with HIV. They spoke out with courage, insisting that science and humanity, not fear and prejudice, guide public understanding. Their advocacy did not end with Ryan's death in 1990. Even today, the White family continues to champion education, access to treatment, and the human dignity of people living with HIV. Through their advocacy, Ryan's story lives on as a reminder of both the personal cost of ignorance and the transformative power of speaking truth to fear, and how many lives could we have saved if we had acted sooner. Ryan passed on April 8th, 1990, at the age of 18.
Now, if you were born in the early 1900s, such as I, you definitely remember bits and pieces of the AIDS crisis. And I remember on 90210, Kelly freaking out because an AIDS patient got his blood on her. And it's like, will she get AIDS? Bah, bah, bah. And it was like a giant cliffhanger. But like, that's not how you get AIDS. You don't get AIDS by getting blood on you. You know what I mean? And then even the AIDS patient in the show was like, that's not how you get it. And people are like, nah, that is how you get it. Blah, blah, blah. And I remember that because like it would freak me out. And then you would see it on the news of be careful, check your gas pumps that someone hasn't put an AIDS needle in there.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom checking. And like as a little kid, I wasn't that old, but I distinctly remember the fear of getting poked by an AIDS needle or people saying that they were going to put them sticking up at the movie theaters. And I think about it now and then, like even when I go to pump gas now and then it pops into my head of like AIDS needle as I grab it out. It's like, my God, like they really put that fear in
Yeah.
and made you think that you could get it by getting blood on you, or that there were people out there who had AIDS and they were an enemy and they were surreptitiously working their way through culture and they wanted to stick little kids with needles to give them AIDS. And then because you see the gay community is painted as like the people who are pushing the disease through society, then you're like, oh my God, then they really are the other, right? And like, thank God that I grew up in a house where being gay was okay. But it still was a fear of like, don't like it once you get AIDS, life is over.
Yeah.
And again, if you grew up during the AIDS crisis, there's definitely a mental before and after line. But one of the sharpest points on that line is friend of the podcast, motherfucking Princess Diana.
Yep.
In the late 80s, when people still genuinely believed that you could get HIV from a handshake or a hug, Princess Diana, Princess of the People, walked into a London hospital in 1987, sat down with an AIDS patient, and very calmly shook his hand. There were no gloves, and there were cameras everywhere, and it was a deliberate, televised middle finger to panic. The image that goes around the world and quietly says, "You will not catch this disease from being kind." And she didn't do it once and disappear. She kept showing up in AIDS wards from London to Africa, listening, hugging, holding hands, and using all that royalty spotlight to say, these are people, not pariahs, and they deserve care, research, and basic human empathy. On the other side of the cultural spectrum, you have Eazy-E. This is 1995, founding member of the NWA, hardcore gangster rap image, and not someone or that anyone in public health was targeting with, the pastel awareness brochure. He was diagnosed with AIDS and announced it publicly right before he died at age 31. He was not an activist in the way Princess Diana was, like he didn't do hospital tours or speeches, but his diagnosis hit like a bomb in Black and urban communities, and these had been largely ignored by mainstream AIDS messaging because suddenly hip hop radio, magazines, and barbershops were talking about AIDS. And his death forced fans to confront that this wasn't some distant gay disease that they had been told to ignore. It can reach straight into their world, their scene, and their heroes. And Rock Hudson does something similar a decade earlier. When he dies in 1985 from AIDS-related complications, he is one of the first major celebrities to do so. Overnight, this thing that the media had treated as a fringe issue is attached to a beloved Hollywood leading man. News anchors have to say the word AIDS on air like it actually matters. And 6 years later, in 1991, NBA superstar Magic Johnson announces that he's HIV positive while still actively playing. And that moment blows another hole in the stereotype that HIV only affects gay men or people who use drugs. Suddenly, sports fans, kids, and families who worshipped Magic are watching him talk about testing, risk, and living with the virus.
I remember the Magic Johnson PSAs. Do you remember those? I remember him sitting in a folding chair on a basketball court talking about living with HIV and the actual ways that it's contracted, and specifying that he can play basketball and sweat because they're still like that whole misconception of like and be totally fine. I very vividly remember that. It's so interesting, and he even like broke the stereotype of what someone with HIV looks like, because he was this giant athletic man. So it even like blew the doors off that one.
Well, and it also forced conversations, because I remember being like, if he can play with AIDS, he's not getting his teammates sick. My parents being like, no, because that's not how it works. It doesn't go through sweat. and being like, oh, okay. And then suddenly all that fear that had been placed online, like, 90210 and all that stuff, it's like, oh, okay.
Hmm.
Like they're not scary
Yeah.
like the way that they have been, I've been taught to think as a young child of 35 in the early 80s, of 67 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
And while all of this is happening in the sporting arena, culture is chewing on it too. Broadway puts AIDS front and center with Tony Kushner's Angels in America in 1991, and then beams it into living rooms with the HBO adaptation in 2003, forcing audiences to sit with politics, grief, and absurdity of the crisis. Hollywood, which had mostly looked away, finally blinks with Philadelphia in 1993, a mainstream movie where Tom Hanks plays a lawyer with AIDS suing for workplace discrimination, and Denzel Washington plays the homophobic attorney who has to has to unlearn rather his own fear in real time. And music didn't stay quiet either. You have Freddie Mercury's death, Elton John's grief, and the founding of the Elton John AIDS Foundation in 1992, which all fed into the shift where the music world wasn't just losing people, but then it began to raise money, push visibility, and insist that AIDS was everyone's problem and not just some marginalized group's tragedy. So you put all that together and you can see how the story moves from sheer terror to something like understanding. Humanizing stories of celebrities and of ordinary people start to show that HIV isn't a punishment, it's just an illness. Activist groups like ACT UP and GMHC push and shove government and pharmaceutical companies into funding education, treatment, and policy changes. The high profile figures like Princess Diana proved in front of cameras that compassion is safer than panic. Film, TV, and theater put AIDS narratives right in front of people who might never have picked up a pamphlet, or pamphlets may have never even been distributed in their areas.
Mm-hmm.
And then science finally fucking catches up because by the mid 90s, antiretroviral therapy starts to turn HIV from automatic death sentences into something that can be managed long term. And the stigma, although it didn't vanish overnight, but between hospital visits, press conferences, plays, movies, music, and medicine, the public was dragged step by step from don't touch them to these are people who deserve to live.
By the mid 1980s, the cause was known: HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus, which attacks immune cells. The identification of the virus made blood screening possible and supported a clear understanding of transmission through sex and blood, including needle transmission. But scientific clarity did not instantly fix societal cruelty. Thousands died even after pathways were understood because knowledge does not automatically become care, especially when prejudice stands between them. In 1983, people living with AIDS gathered and wrote what became known as the Denver Principles, rejecting the language that portrayed them as passive victims and insisting on their right to participate in decisions, to be treated with dignity, and to be seen as whole people. By 1987, protests became survival. ACT UP formed because people were dying faster than institutions moved. Their slogan, "Silence equals death," was not rhetorical flourish, it was a literal equation. They shut down streets, they stormed institutions, they forced the FDA, pharmaceutical companies, media networks, and politicians to look directly at the consequences of delay. They staged die-ins because bodies were already everywhere. If society refused to see them in hospital wards, activists would bring them to the steps of power. In the mid 1990s, combination of antiretroviral therapy, commonly called HART, changed the epidemic's trajectory. Death rates fell sharply in places where people had access, and HIV began to shift for many, not all, as like Chelsea said, from a near certain death sentence into a chronic medical condition. The emotional whiplash of that change is hard to describe. People who had planned to die began planning to live, but survival came with its own weight. Walk into many LGBTQ plus spaces today, and you'll feel it. An absence that isn't just personal, but cultural. There should be more elders, more mentors, more queer grandfathers and funny uncles and silver-haired activists who can tell younger people what the 1970s felt like before the plague years. Instead, there is a gap, an entire generation erased, a lineage severed. Survivors carry that gap inside of them. Many describe walking into queer spaces and realizing there should be people their age, but there are only younger faces and silence where peers should be. They remember lovers, roommates, exes, rivals, drag queens, poets, bartenders, the fabric of queer life unraveling thread by thread. Some lost dozens of friends, some lost hundreds. AIDS produced love stories that were both ordinary and mythic. Ordinary because they were made of daily care, mythic because the world tried to deny they were love at all. There are stories of men carrying their boyfriend's body weight for months, feeding them soup when they couldn't lift a spoon, sleeping beside them even as lesions spread, and then being denied recognition at the funeral because legal systems did not count their relationship. There are stories of lovers cutting locks of hair and keeping them in lockets, because when the world refuses to acknowledge your grief, you create your own rituals anyway. There are drag performers who performed until they needed walkers, refusing to let sickness strip their color. People filled caskets with sequins, morticians complained. Glitter, like grief, never leaves completely.
There's a drag queen who was on RuPaul's Drag Race, Charlie Hyde, who talks about what it was like to live through this time and how they literally did lose an entire generation of people.
Oh, absolutely. There's an entire gap of people and culture, a generation literally wiped out. I don't think any words can fully describe the severity in numbers and the quickness in which death came sweeping through communities.
Mm-hmm.
Genuinely in weeks, months if you were lucky, hundreds of people gone. And especially in this era where a lot of the queer communities were condensed into spaces that they had made, like in Greenwich Village in New York or the Castro in San Francisco, it is very obvious and felt physically and emotionally that these people are gone. It would be like the fucking rapture. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you went from, January the year before to the streets filled with people partying for New Year's, so much so that you were shoulder to shoulder on the sidewalk, to a fucking ghost town. Like, it was not, and it's twofold, right? Not just because people were literally dying or getting so sick that they couldn't leave their house, but also because people were afraid and scared and they didn't know. And it was like a lot of hiding, so it would
even look at the lavender scare that they would have endured a couple of generations earlier.
Absolutely. And because of like the stigmatization and fear and discrimination at large, not only were you like battling within yourself to be like, what's going on? Like, can I still like hug my partner? Can I still lay with them? Like, can we hold hands? Like, literally not even knowing if like that's the cause, because government systems that fund scientific research were so catastrophically horrific that like no one fucking knew anything. You're having that internal battle with yourself. And then you're also trying to care for your friends who are dying at rates you cannot even fucking fathom, right? Yeah. And then society at large is like, that's what you fucking get,
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine? It seems silly to say, but like, that for a while the rhetoric was a gay disease by paupers and seamen. What the fuck? Like, that's fucking goofy. That's fucking goofy, wacky fucking wheels. Like, but to have that shoved down your throat as like the reason and be like, well, this is what you get. You chose this. This is your punishment. Like, all of those wars happening inside of you and mental anguish is, I can't even fathom it.
Well, then even like look at what happened with COVID with like Asian communities. They were talking about like hate crimes happening on the street and all of this stuff. So it's like putting blame on a specific group of people, like marginalized people in the United States. I mean, they're like a ethnic minority and they're getting attacked. Like, yeah, you're going to start seeing populations disappear. Like, not only like in their homes into fear, but like leaving areas, and it's just fucking insane.
Tough. Yeah.
How much better would the United States be if we would have acted correctly in either instance? And responded with care and compassion instead of like hatred and otherness.
Yeah. Instead of hatred, ignorance, fear mongering. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to imagine. It's upsetting to think about what we were robbed of as a society by losing these people, by losing these like prolific artists and compassionate activists and just incredible friends and family members like gone.
Hmm.
You can't even begin to understand like what was like lost with that, you know?
Yeah. Because it's like, how do you know what's lost when you've taken it away and you can't see what it would have come to fruition to in the future?
Yeah, like right as
Just,
soon as it's like blooming, right? Like people, all of these people in their mid to early 20s, early 30s dying before they reach 35, like, oh my God, they were just becoming into themselves and they were just ripped
yeah.
ripped from this earth so ferociously, invisibly. Seeing someone dwindle physically has a toll on you mentally that you can't even really like understand the effects of it. It's so helpless.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so upsetting to look back and see that it was all of those deaths were attributed to like discrimination and hate and bigotry and fear mongering, and it's really fucking sad, and it's really fucking disgusting to think that like all of these people lost their lives because of just hate at the end of the day, just
Yeah.
hate and ignorance. um it's I don't know, it's tough. It's tough to look back and have specific pinpoints in history where you can go, if this person did this, everything would be
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. If Reagan would have just fucking done something.
Yeah, not been a fucking piece of shit. So today, people living with HIV who have consistent access to treatment can live long, healthy lives. Prevention tools exist, including condoms, regular testing, and PrEP,
Pre-exposure prophylaxis.
prophylaxis.
I
Yeah.
got you.
I know the PrEP commercials from watching
Okay.
Drag Race. PrEP is a daily medication that could prevent HIV infection with extraordinary effectiveness. Ideally, and I believe this, PrEP should be widely available and used by anyone who is sexually active. Yet, access is uneven. Public understanding is better than it was, but HIV has not vanished, and neither has stigma. The distribution of safety remains unequal by race, by class, by geography, by access to healthcare, by who is protected by law and who is not, which means the lessons of AIDS is still active. Public health cannot be driven by morality or politics without becoming cruel and ineffective. Cough, cough.
Mhm.
The trans healthcare issue. Cough, cough. When society treats a group as disposable, disease will exploit that disposability. When governments delay because the dying are inconvenient, the virus gains time. When the press hunts a scapegoat, systems escape accountability. The AIDS crisis remains one of the clearest warnings modern history offers, not just about viruses, but about what prejudice does to the timeline of how discrimination turns a medical emergency into a human catastrophe. And yet, there is another legacy, equally true. Communities refuse to disappear. They build care out of nothing. They turned rage into policy change. They dragged science forward with their hands. They preserved dignity when dignity was being stripped away. To remember AIDS properly is to say this happened, this was allowed, this was fought, this was survived. And we do not get to inherit the medicines without also inheriting the responsibility to respond faster, to scapegoat less, to value lives equally, and to treat the next crisis as a test we refuse to fail.
I'm doing the
And
cunty clapping.
yeah,
You can't hear it, but
doing the I don't know if you could hear it either. Thumb to middle finger. But yeah, I don't know. Obviously, I have like a weird little tie to fear mongering during the AIDS crisis as a blood transfusion recipient in the 90s in New York. I understand the fear and stigmatization and misunderstanding and the prevailing anxieties that come along with that. But there is, I don't know, a profound sadness and disappointment in humanity when it had the chance to show up at large and it didn't. But
Yeah.
there's also this profound empathy in the way that communities responded. These communities, these marginalized groups, right?
Yeah.
They weren't just in the queer community. They were lesbians, they were trans, they were excluded from the excluded group. They were outright denied care and safety and jobs and housing from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And then this epidemic hits their adjacent communities and they're like, fuck, well, I've got to do something because no one else will.
Yeah. Yep.
And it says something so powerful that people's relation to power really has nothing to do with the capacity for human resilience and empathy.
Yeah.
They had no access to any of the resources that we barely have access to, that were full out denied. And they were still like, we're going to make it work. We're going to be there for you. We're going to figure it out. We're going to learn.
Yes.
And like most things, the mirror of it all is still relevant today, right? Where you have, I mean, fuck, I'm blanking on the name of the girl, but that woman who had a high risk pregnancy and should have gotten a medical abortion to save her life, and they denied it anyway.
Yeah.
And she died. And then the state forced.
They kept her body alive to functioning enough.
Alive is a generous term.
Yeah, they kept her body functioning so that the
Yeah.
baby could continue its incubation period.
They put a dead body through machines and pumps, but it couldn't even be kept alive because then it started to decay because it was a dead body. And inside of that dead body was a fetus growing off of the nutrients of a dead person because of the state's discrimination. And now that baby has been born and is struggling to exist because that's what happens when you fucking force birth out of death.
Yeah.
You have shit like that going on where it's unequal and it's unfair and it's cruel and it's harmful, right? You have trans people being completely denied not even their right to medical care, but their right to exist on a state level in some cases. You have,
like they weren't even letting them in with their partners into the hospital. And that's still a thing that happens legally. Like,
yeah,
if your marriage isn't accepted, then you have no right to be an advocate for your ill partner.
And I mean, you have families with like young kids fleeing states because of the active harmful laws and legislations that will attack their children, that will cause fucking quote unquote like gender affirming visibility checks before they can participate in sports. It's like disgusting for the, like less than 1% of the population, right? You have you have just, you know, even with minority communities today and like the ICE raids and kidnappings and vanishings of people, the establishment is failing us. And we should still fight that. We should still fight for each other. But like the each other is like the big thing here. It's like you don't have to work in Congress to be a good neighbor.
Yeah.
You don't have to be on the news preaching. You could just share food with, you know, a friend who's going through it.
Yeah. Or even a kind ear.
Yeah.
Like just listen to someone, you know? It's I can't even imagine how horrifying it would be to have a disease that with how bad you're being treated, and then not only that, but like being forced to die alone.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, all that to say, obviously, fight for your rights, the rights of people, but also be a active community member and compassionate and empathetic person.
Yeah.
It's all our fucking first time on Earth, man. We're all just trying to survive.
Yep. We're all in this together, unfortunately. And fortunately.
Yeah, true. So with that, we will say we are at Go to Hell Podcast. I am at Noelle Fain. That is at Sith Lord. And you can find in all of our bios a link to a link tree, which if you click will pull up our Patreon. Dollar gets you in. A lot of interesting details about Chelsea's childhood we learned.
You know, I'm real scared. I'm an open book.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a lot of information about me that I didn't realize was so weird once it came out.
Technically, it's not weird. 37, what was it? 37 to 67% of kids
Are
but
impacted by it.
weird to me. Weird
Yeah, it
to
was
me.
weird to Noelle.
So
It was weird to this little blood baby right here.
it's true. $1 gets you in. Check that out. We also have a link to our merch. 100% of proceeds are donated. And I think this month it would be fitting to donate to a nonprofit AIDS research group, HIV AIDS research group. So we'll absolutely be doing that. In there, you can find cool ass merch, and most of it is created by Kelly Halloran or at Wild Wood Owl on Etsy. She makes cool shit for us. She makes cool shit in general. Check her out. The holiday season is coming up. She's super affordable. She's super creative. Support Thriftmas, which also includes small business, and she is one of them. So check her out. We also have a link to our YouTube where you can bully us in the comments.
Please.
And I don't know why you'd need it, but we also have a link to listen to us, which is anywhere podcasts are heard.
Hell yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and give a hail to everyone from past and present and future who continues to fight the good fight and help where they can and lead with empathy and love and support and kindness in their heart.
Yes, I love the messaging of lead with empathy and support love and kindness in your heart. With that being said, I'm going to say hail the cold-handed death that came for Ronald Reagan.
It wasn't cold enough.
Yeah.
I don't, we've looked this up before. How did Ronald Reagan die?
I think just old age.
He died after having Alzheimer's disease for almost a decade. He was diagnosed in 1994. So he just got to forget that he was a piece of shit. That's not fair.
Yeah.
That's not fucking fair. Damn, bitch ass. What a fucking bitch ass loser. Ugh. God, death was not cruel enough for him. So anyway, I guess we could get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, let's get the fuck out of here.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.